Hi, welcome to the next part in the series of configuring the ingestion monitoring software. Previously, we've discovered the connectors, we've added the framework, metastore, and content engines. We're now going to go through a process of how we start to monitor the control point services and give us some visibility to the state of those services. So again, we need to go into configuration. Inside the configuration tab, there is an entry in the middle where we can configure the servers that we want to look for the control point services and begin to monitor not only how much CPU resource they're consuming, but also monitoring their status. So if they're running, stopped, or being started. So we need to enter the server names for each of the servers we want to look for control point processes that have been installed. So in our case, we've got two particular servers, so we're going to enter the server names for each of them. This one I'm going to make a slight mistake on, so hopefully you will see that if I try to add an invalid server, it should come back and tell us that it's an invalid server. It doesn't actually exist. So I will go and change it to the real name and then add that device. So again, I'm going to shut down and restart. The shutdown process will take slightly longer. Nothing too large. It's just capable of probably a couple of seconds, because we're obviously shutting down a lot more background processes, and we have to coordinate the shutdown so that we actually talk to each of the individual components. Right, so let's restart. I'm going to maximize the screen. So this stage now, you will see if I scroll across to the right hand side, we've now discovered each of the control point components that are installed on the two servers that we added. So the server name at the top and the second server. These are all the control point services that reside on those particular servers, and also the status of those servers. So obviously green means they are active and running, and red they're stopped. We can, for example, now we've got two stop services, I could select, for example, the redirector by clicking on the red button, and then I can restart the service. We will see the service change to like a pinky color while it's going through its transition of being started. If it starts, it will then go to a green shade. So we can perform the restart and shutdown of any of the control point services. So even if it's on an alternative node, maybe if I want to take the OneDrive connector, and I can stop and then select it again, and I can start. So it just shows that we can have control over the control point services. We can manage them from this central pane of glass. What you will also have noticed that we've added two columns, one labeled shutdown and one labeled startup, and by default they're all set to 12. Now the idea here is that we wanted to introduce some mechanism of having a consistent, reliable, and automated shutdown and startup sequence for all the control point components. So obviously this hasn't been configured. This is non-configured. So basically we have an option of setting a level between 1 and 12. So the components which have a lower number are shut down first. So for example, you probably want to shut down your connectors first, and then shut down your other components afterwards, probably finishing with something like the redirector, for example, at a very high number, maybe a 12. So this really allows us to define a sequence for the shutdown and also a sequence for the startup. Now, for example, let's go through. So I'm going to set my SharePoint framework to be 2. I'm going to set my SharePoint connector to be 1. I'm going to set my OneDrive connector to be 1. I'm going to set my file system connector to also be 1. The framework to 2. The Exchange framework again to 2. And my Exchange connector to 1. So this enables really us just to set an order. If two components have the same number, then they will be shut down one after the other. So basically, we will shut down all the 1s first, all the 2s, 3s, all the way through to all the components are shut down. And it's the same with the startup. So on startup, the components with the lowest number, so 1, would be the first component to be restarted. So on a restart, we probably want to have the control point license server. So this is the idle license server to be started first, because each of the other idle components will request a license from this particular device. So this is how we just predefine our, let's say, a shutdown and startup order to give us some consistency and reliability. These settings are all stored inside the database, the configuration database, so it's persistent once set up. Obviously, we can modify it at any stage, and then those modifications will be stored also inside the database. So I hope you found that useful. The next video, I will go through and show you how to perform a shutdown, how to perform a startup, and we'll actually run some ingestions, so you can see some data flowing through the system and give you a feel for what it looks like in real action. Thank you.